Thank you for tuning in to the Leadership Forum, a space where you will hear perspectives from global industry executives on human ingenuity and how they catalyzed it to unlock value and realize their organization's true potential. We will keep it real. We will hear what's worked well and learnings from instances where things could have worked better. I'm your host, Saquib, Vali, partner at SpyderWorks and explorer. Say hi to the future, the fast-growing community highlighting the human side of ingenuity. Our guest today is Paula Cruickshank, a seasoned banker with over 23 years in the banking industry. She's currently Senior Vice President overseeing BDC's financing and consulting services. She's also an LLM, so clearly I'm not winning any arguments today. But more importantly, she's a mom, she's a friend, and one of the most amazing individuals I have had the pleasure of getting to know. So welcome, Paula.
Thank you so much, Saquib. It's a pleasure to be here with an intro like that.
All right. So, Paula, you know what? Before, I've gotten to know you in a really good way. But why don't we let our audiences know how you would wish to introduce yourself?
Well, thank you very much. I guess I would like to introduce myself as a non-traditional banker. So currently, I'm a development banker, which means I work with companies to help them grow. But my path to running BDC's Ontario operations is a little unusual. I started out way back with the Canadian Bankers Association, and that was sort of the intersection of politics and finance. So basically, that was an opportunity for us to look at the statistics on how much support small businesses were getting in Canada. And the concern was that they were not getting enough support. I worked with the banking industry and it was early in my career. I was putting together spreadsheets and making sure that we had the information available to represent the industry. I then went on to Scotiabank and had an amazing opportunity to work in their corporate banking group. But I was working with financial institutions, and of course got to see all sorts of different financial institutions players, and then started doing something that was quite new in the financial markets at that time, which was securitization. And securitization, as many folks on the line may know, was at the heart of the financial crisis, but back in 08, 09, but for many, many years, it was a way for financial companies to finance more businesses than they might have ordinarily by packaging their financial assets and selling them to the market. So in that respect, I was a very non-traditional banker working in structured finance. The financial crisis took me to BDC, where I got to start up a team that was going to support this market. And it was an amazing, amazing experience to be able to have the big picture of what was happening in the securitization or the asset-backed security market in Canada. And we were able to support the market through to be able to come full circle and continue being productive and supporting businesses throughout this period. We started up our own business supporting finance companies. And then about 8 years ago, I decided I wanted to work directly with the entrepreneurs that BDC supports. And so that's when I headed to BC and started working directly with entrepreneurs. And it's been amazing ever since then.
You know what? I can just imagine. How fun. So we first met at McKay CEO Forum, right? And since then, I've had the pleasure of having you come on as a keynote last year at Open's conference. And you're seen within the industry as an influencer. So let's begin. Tell us something about the BDC and the work that you do. how do you help entrepreneurs, etc. But in telling us that, also do shed some light on some of the things that we all get wrong about the BDC. And this is your time to set it right.
Appreciate the opportunity. So yeah, the organization of Pakistani entrepreneurs was a great opportunity to be able to speak with entrepreneurs. So thanks so much for setting that up. But basically, what BDC does that's different is that it's a more patient lender, and it's a lender that essentially looks at a business's cash flows rather than being completely wedded to taking collateral. The expertise with BDC is that we spend time looking at a business's cash flows, its potential, and what we can do in terms of working capital as well as other financing to be able to support the growth of that business. So it's a bit of a different perspective. We're able to take more risk than the chartered banks because we do have government support. So we still have to do things on a commercial basis, though.
Sure.
We're not a grant issuing organization. We do charge interest on the loans that we make. But
so spoiler alert for all our audiences, that if you were thinking you can listen to this and Paula would start writing checks, that's not necessarily the case. All right, got it.
You got it. But we are able to provide more flexibility to entrepreneurs, and that means perhaps there's a period of time when the business isn't going as well, and we postpone the principal payments, for example. There might be a time when that entrepreneur really needs the cash flows out of the business, and we could look at amortizing the payments over a longer period of time. Those are the types of innovations that we can do that really are required sometimes when you're starting up a business. You don't always know how things are going to go. And I guess on that, I've got two things that I wanted to clarify about the BDC. First of all, I would say that there is a lot of support for startup businesses, and we're often associated with startups. But the truth is, we do need some history to be able to help the business because we look at the cash flows. So there has to be some cash flows typically. We do have a venture group that can work with really big ideas, and that might be pre-revenue, but the core business does work with organizations that have some cash flows for sure. So that's one piece. And I guess the other thing I'd like to debunk is that we don't just work with small businesses. So certainly we work with small and medium-sized enterprises, but medium-sized businesses in Canada go all the way up to businesses that have up to 500 employees. So we're not just working with sole proprietors or the smallest businesses. We can contribute significantly to larger businesses as well. So those are the two things. We're really working to grow businesses for sure.
Thanks a lot. I think that's extremely helpful. Now, I want to get this conversation going to human ingenuity, but just in a sec. One of the things that in how you mentioned it, and I'm just curious, would you also try and find marry small startups and your medium-sized companies, because there could be synergies that could come through? So is that something that you guys look at?
So what I would say is that happens organically. So our people who are on the ground, our development bankers, are regularly connecting people. So we're looking more and more closely at the types of value that we're able to offer entrepreneurs. Certainly connecting businesses with, say, new suppliers or new advisors. Those are some of the things that we do. Maybe an accountant, maybe a lawyer. We do that all the time. But in this era of transition, we're starting to see that there are more and more connections like that we're making. We don't do it formally, Saquib, but because our people tend to have a broad network, it's certainly happening organically. And
Cool.
we've got a group that specializes in transitioning businesses. So basically, working to make sure businesses, that want to acquire or sell, that they can get some support. That might be another place for sure.
Cool. Very nice. Very cool. Um, let's get this conversation a bit towards human ingenuity. What I because that's obviously close to the heart, and obviously that's the topic of this podcast. Um, with the number of entrepreneurs that you interact with, right? And also, um, also just in how BDC innovates and reinvents itself on such a regular basis, because we know that. Um, Let me get your take on, if I was to ask you to frame human ingenuity, specifically the human side of ingenuity, how would you frame it in your experience?
Well, in my experience, it's about being open. It's so essentially the opportunities that I've had in my life to look at financing from a different perspective has been because I was willing to give it a try, because I didn't have too rigid an idea about the way things should be. So that's the way I think about human ingenuity. It's openness to these ideas. By the same token, we do have to still understand generally how things work. So it's kind of this balance between the openness and the great ideas. I was at a fintech conference a couple weeks ago, and I was hearing such amazing ideas from the entrepreneurs that were there. But there also has to be a reality check, right? An understanding of the way things work, the constraints that might exist. I've worked with a lot of technology companies, and while we see the great potential sometimes of technology, there's a long way between the idea and the execution. And it's certainly helped by a good understanding of how things actually works. And so in that respect, the place that I see human ingenuity the most is among the people who are close to a problem. So they
Mm.
understand how things work, but they also can see the areas that need to improve. And that's what I really love. It's when people come to an old problem with a new set of eyes, but one that takes the things that we don't have control over into account.
In the old idiom, one has to walk and chew gum. I completely understand. I completely understand. Um, it's funny, and you've got years of experience, and so I really liked how you framed human ingenuity, right? Um, give me a real life story where you feel it worked really well in the past, or give me a story where you felt it didn't work. Um, but in either of those, share the learnings, right? I mean, what made something work really well, or what didn't make something work really well, and what did you learn from it that our listeners can also learn from?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll share a story that's a few years old now, but when we were putting together the platform that exists today at BDC to help finance companies, it's a business model we call the financing for independent lenders. And basically, the people who were putting that together took ideas from the capital markets, essentially looking at the term market and the commercial paper market, and put these two things together with BDC's capability as an investor, and came up with a platform that was really supportive for smaller finance companies. So this was an example of understanding how things worked deeply, looking at the challenges that those companies had in matching their assets and their liabilities, and then designing something that fit for it. So I think that worked well. Some of the places where I've seen challenges is, for example, this in the tech space, where we've seen some amazing ideas, but a little lack of understanding of how to get there. So I went to a pitch competition, for example, and lots of great ideas, but sometimes gaps in how you're actually going to get there.
Cool, very cool. So as it relates to harnessing, nurturing human ingenuity, whether it's in your organizations or with the entrepreneurs that you're working with, or the ideas you're trying to match, what's some advice that you would give to our listeners, or to other leaders, frankly, if one was to go about, how would they go about harnessing or realizing the full potential of human ingenuity within their organizations or with the people that they're working with?
Yeah, it sounds a little cliche, but to me, it's about listening, right? So those great ideas come about when we start the conversation with people who may often be subject matter experts, right? And if we give them the confidence and open up our ears, I think a lot of them have great ideas about what might work, but they're very conscious of the obstacles. So I think ingenuity isn't always, a massive headline. It isn't always the completely new business. Sometimes it's the tweaks around a process. Sometimes it's the tweaks around a particular challenge. And if we keep our ears open, we might find that we get something really new by putting older things that aren't working so well together.
Ingenuity is not a headline. You know what? This has been really, really cool. I understand. I think in our own world, that's exactly how it is, Paula. I mean, it's those little tweaks that could make a huge amount of difference. And in a lot of cases, it's not even necessarily just execution. It could just be thinking or coming at things slightly differently. But you know what? The other part about, you need to know how things work. So while you're dreaming big, you also need to execute on it. So all of that is great. Thanks a lot, Paula, for taking the time. This has been a really insightful conversation with you. Our listeners would love to hear more from you. So we will tag you and we will tag the BDC in our show notes. But thank you again for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Saquib. Really enjoyed it.
The Say Hi to the Future podcast series is produced by Sonia Romero, edited by Matt Miller, and special effects by Edward Vasquez. Please leave us your thoughts and let us know if there's a guest you want us to have a conversation with. You can find all Say Hi to the Future podcast series on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube.